Chapter 7. Thursday morning the sun rose clear and beautiful, but instead of pushing on as we had expected, we were told that we would wait where we were until the trails had dried and the rivers had receded, so we could proceed more comfortably. We were all fearful lest our provisions should be exhausted, and one of our party voiced this fear. Emil, who had charge of the whole outfit, came to us and said, "You need not fear. Does not God take care of all his creatures, both great and small? And are we not his creatures? You will see that here I have a few kernels of corn or corn seed. I will plant them. By this act I have definitely said that I want corn. I have formed corn in my mind. I have fulfilled the law, and in due season it will come forth. Is it necessary for us to await the long, arduous process that nature in her slow growth and unfoldment will take in order to grow corn? If so, we would be obliged to wait a long, hard time to obtain it. Why not use a higher or more perfect law, given us by the Father, to produce it? All that is required is to become quiet and visualize or idealize corn, and we have corn cured, ready for use. If you doubt it, you can gather it, grind it into meal, then make it into bread." There before us was corn grown and cured so that we did gather it, and grind it, and afterwards made it into bread. Then Emil went on to say, "This you have seen and believe, but why not use a more perfect law and bring forth a more perfect thing, or exactly what you want? Bread. You will see by using this more perfect, or as you would say, more subtle law, I am able to bring forth exactly what I need, bread." And as we stood there spellbound, a large loaf of bread was in his hands. Nor did the supply stop until there were 40 loaves upon the table before us, placed there apparently by Emil himself. He remarked, "You see there is sufficient for all. If not sufficient, more can be supplied until there is enough, and to spare." We all ate the bread and pronounced it good. Emil continued, "When Jesus at Galilee asked Philip, 'Whence shall we buy bread?' he did this to try him, for within himself he knew full well there was no necessity to buy the bread needed to feed the assembled multitude, nor to secure it through the material market then in existence. He saw the opportunity to prove to his disciples the power of bread leavened or increased by the Spirit. How often man, in the mortal concept, thinks as did Philip. He was calculating, as human consciousness is calculating today, from the visible supply on hand, thinking he had only so much bread, or so much supply, or so much money with which to buy. Jesus recognized that the one in Christ consciousness knows no limitation. He then, in Christ consciousness, looked to God as the source and creator of all, and gave thanks for the power and substance right at hand to fulfill every want. He then broke and distributed through his disciples to those in outer need until the need was supplied, and there remained 12 baskets over. Jesus never depended on the oversupply of another to fill his need, nor the need of another. But he taught that our supply is right at hand in universal substance, where all supply exists, and all we need do is to create it or bring it forth. Just so when Elisha multiplied the widow's oil, he did not apply to someone having an overabundance of oil. For he had done this, the supply would have been limited. He contacted the universal, and the only limit to the supply was that all the vessels were filled. The supply could have flowed on until this day had there been vessels to receive it. This is not hypnotism, None of you feel that you are in any way under a hypnotic spell. Let me say that the one hypnotism is the self-hypnotism of believing that each and every one cannot do the perfect works of God and create the desired condition or thing. For is not the need itself the desire to create? Instead of unfolding and creating as God wills us to create, you fold up in your little shells and say, I can't. And you hypnotize yourselves into actually believing that you are separate entities apart from God. You simply fall short of your perfect creation or expression. You do not let God express perfectly through you as it is His desire to do. Did not Jesus, the great Master, say, The works that I do, ye shall do also, and greater works than these shall ye do? Was it not Jesus' true mission here on earth to show that we, as sons of God, or man in his true estate, can create as perfectly and as harmoniously as God does? When Jesus commanded the blind man to bathe his eyes in the pool of Siloam, was not this intended to open the eyes of all? All were to see that Jesus was sent by the Father to show us that the Father intended us to create exactly as He creates. All are to do the perfect work as Jesus did by recognizing the Christ in Himself and in all. I can go one step further. This loaf I just received and held in my hand is consumed as though burned by fire. What happened? I misused the perfect law that brought forth my conception and consumed that which I brought forth. Because of my misuse, or not using rightly or righteously, the perfect law which is as exact as music or mathematics or any other so-called natural law. If I persisted in the misuse of the perfect law, it would consume not only that which I create, but would consume me, the Creator. Is the bread really destroyed? We will admit the form is changed, for, in place of the loaf, we have a small amount of dust or ashes. Has it not in reality been returned to the universal substance from which it sprang? Is it not now in unmanifest form, waiting to be brought again into manifestation? Is this not the way with all forms that go from our sight, either by fire or decay, or in any other way? Do they not return to the universal substance, God, from which they sprang? Is this not the meaning of what descends from heaven must ascend into heaven? A short time ago you saw ice formed, without any apparent cause, as you perhaps think of it. Let me say that this is the same as creating the bread. I can use the law to obtain ice as well as bread, just as long as I use either as a benefit to mankind, or as long as I am working in living accord with the law, or expressing as God wishes all to express. It is good for all to make bread, or ice, or any and all things desired, and all must press on to the stage at which they can do these things. Can you not see that by using the highest law, the absolute law of God, you may bring forth that which you need to conceive in mind as your highest idea, and thus please God more fully, by manifesting more fully, knowing as Jesus did, that we are perfect sons of God? Does not this suggest freedom from commercial bondage as well as all other bondage? As I see it, the commercial bondage will, in a few years, become the greatest bondage of all. If it goes on at the rate it is now progressing, it will dominate man, soul, and body. And it cannot do otherwise than consume itself and those that are interested in it. There is no question but that the first inception of commercialism was on a high spiritual plane. But materialism was allowed to creep in until the very power used to create is the power that will consume. Just as the very power used to create will always consume if not used rightly. Is not the pressing of commercialism and limitations upon us crowding us on to see that we must come up over or overcome these conditions? Is not this done by simply realizing that we are to do the perfect works of God, to raise our consciousness to the Christ consciousness? Is not this what Jesus taught us here on earth? Does not his whole life exemplify this? My dear brothers, do you not see that in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was with God? At this time, everything to be formed later was in unmanifest form in the universal mind substance, or as expressed by some in chaos. This word in the original was actuality. This word, chaos, is misinterpreted to mean a turbulent or warring state instead of the deep spiritual state of actuality, always awaiting a definite, creative spoken word through which it can spring forth into manifest form. When God principle desired to bring forth the world out of universal mind substance, God was quiet and contemplative. In other words, God saw an ideal world. He held in mind that substance of which the world was to be formed, a sufficient time to lower its vibration. Then he spoke the word, and the world was formed. Or, as we might say, God visualized a mental pattern or mold into which could flow the substance needed to make the world, and it came forth a perfect form, built upon the pattern which was held in consciousness. All these things might have been thought of by God, infinite power. He might have wished during an indefinite time that they were formed and made visible. Had not the definite spoken word been put forth into the formless ether, nothing would have been created or brought forth into visible form. In order to establish invisible results, the thought and desires of even an infinite omnipotent creator, and bring orderly forms out of actuality, it took the definite, positive, let there be. So must we take the definite step. God is holding the ideal perfect world in mind in every detail, and it is bound to come forth as a heaven or perfect home where all his children, all his creatures, and all his creations may dwell in peace and harmony. This is the perfect world that God saw in the beginning, and the one he is thinking into existence right now. And the time of its manifestation lies in our acceptance of it. When we can come to the one place and know that we are all one man, and know that we are all members of God's body, as much as one member of our body is a part of the whole body, then we are in and of God's kingdom, heaven here on earth now. To make this manifest, realize that there is nothing material in heaven. All is spiritual. Realize that heaven is a perfect state of consciousness, a perfect world here on earth now. And all we need to do is to accept it. It is here all about us, waiting for us to open the inner eye. Through the eye, our bodies shall be made light, the light which is neither of the sun nor moon, but of the Father. And the Father is right here in the very innermost part of our being. We must sufficiently realize that there is nothing material, that all is spiritual. Then we must think of that wonderful God-given spiritual world which is right here now if we can realize it. Do you not see that God created all in this way? Did not God first become quiet and contemplative and see the light? Then he said, "Let there be light," and it was so. In the same way he said, "Let there be a firmament," and it was so. And likewise with other creations, he held each form of ideal steadfast in consciousness, then spoke the word, and the ideal was brought forth. Just so with man God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and give him dominion all over." God, all good, created all things good. Man, the greatest and last, with full dominion over all. Then man saw only good, and all was good until man separated himself from God and saw duality, or two. Then he, by his thought, created two, one good, and the other the opposite. For if there were two, they would be opposite, good and evil. Thus evil came through man's perfect power to express or bring forth that which he gazed upon. If man had not seen evil, evil would have been given no power of expression. Only the good would have been expressed, and we would be as perfect as God sees us today. Would not heaven always have been on earth as God sees it, and as we must all see it to make it manifest? Jesus had a perfect right to say that he came from heaven, for did not all come from heaven, the great universal mind substance? Since man was created in the image and likeness of God, did not God give man the power to create exactly as he creates? And does not God expect man to use that power as freely as he uses it, and exactly the same way? By first perceiving the need, then conceiving the good, the ideal, with which to fill the mold that we hold in consciousness, and which is to be filled from the universal mind substance, then sending forth the word that is filled, that it is so, and it is good. Jesus, when he was crucified, gave his flesh, the outer, that what we see of the body, to prove that there is really a deeper or spiritual body. And it is this spiritual body that he manifested when he came forth from the tomb. This is the body of which he spoke when he said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." He did this to show us we have the same spiritual body, and that we can do all the works he did. There is no question that if Jesus had wished to do so, he could have saved himself. There is no doubt but that he saw there was a great change taking place in his body. He also saw that those about him were not able to see what they also could bring forth the spiritual body, as he was attempting to have them see. They still looked to the personal, and he saw that if he brought forth the spiritual body without some decided change, the people would not be able to discern between the material and the spiritual. So he adopted the way of the crucifixion to bring about the change. Truly is not this the Christ in man, which the great Master Jesus, whom we all love and reverence, came to show? Did he not unfold his life here on earth to show us the perfect way to God? Can we do other than love this perfect ideal way when we won't see it? Whether it be planting seed, making bread, or doing the 1,000,001 things necessary to human existence. Are not these acts mere lessons, carrying us on to our unfoldment? Some day we are to realize that we are truly sons of God, not servants, that as sons we can and do have all that the Father has, and that we can use it just as freely as our Father does. I admit this takes a mighty faith at first, one that usually must be taken step by step, and must be practiced faithfully like music or mathematics, until we come to the place of knowing. Then we are grandly, beautifully free. Could there be a better, truer example of this life than that of Jesus? Can you not recognize the power that is in his name, Jesus, the Christ made manifest, or God manifesting through the flesh man? Jesus came to the place where he relied wholly upon his deep knowledge or understanding of God, and this is how he did his mighty works. He did not rely upon his own willpower or upon strong, concentrated thoughts. Neither must we rely upon our own willpower, nor strong, concentrated thoughts, but upon the will of God. 'Tis not my will, but thine, O God, be done. Will to do the will of God. Do you not think that Jesus willed in all things to do the will of God, or to do what God willed him to do? You will note that very often Jesus is referred to as going into a higher mountain. Whether he physically ascended a high mountain or not, I do not know. This I do know, that we must all ascend to the heights, the very highest in consciousness, to receive our illumination. This height means the very top of the head, and there, if the faculty is not developed, we must develop it by spiritual thoughts. Then from the heart, the love center, we must let love flow forth to balance all, and when this is done, the Christ is revealed. The Son of Man perceives that he is the Son of God, the only begotten Son, in whom the Father is well pleased. Then with constant love, we must realize this for all. Just stop and think deeply for a moment and realize the countless numbers of the grains of sand of the seashore, the countless numbers of drops of water that go to make up the waters of the earth, the countless number of life forms in the waters of the earth. Then realize the countless number of rock particles that are contained in the whole earth, the countless number of trees, plants, flowers, and shrubs upon the earth, the countless number of forms of animal life upon the earth. Realize that all are the outpicturing of the ideal held in the great universal mind of God, that they all contain the one life, the life of God. Then think of the countless number of souls born upon this earth. Then realize that each soul is a perfect outpictured ideal image of God as God sees himself, that each soul is given the same power, expression, and dominion over all that God himself has. Do you not think that God's will or wishes man to unfold these God-like or God-given qualities and to do the works that God does through the inheritance given man by the Father, the one great universal mind in all, through all, and above all? Then realize that each person is an expression or pressing out from the unseen, the Spirit, into visible form, a form through which God loves to express. When we can realize and accept this, we can truly say as Jesus did, "Behold, the Christ is here." It is in this way that he attained his mastery over the worldly or flesh self. He recognized, claimed, and accepted his divinity, then lived the life, just as we must do. Chapter 8. After a delay of 8 days, we broke camp on Monday morning and proceeded on our way. The afternoon of the third day out, we came to the bank of a larger river. The stream was about 2,000 feet wide, running bankful, and the current was at least 10 miles per hour. We were told that this stream, in ordinary times, could be crossed at this place without any inconvenience. We decided to camp until morning and observe the rise and fall of the water. We were informed that we would be able to cross by a bridge farther upstream, but to reach this bridge would necessitate a detour of at least 4 days' hard travel. We felt that if the water was receding, it would be better to wait a few days rather than undertake the long detour. It had been demonstrated to us that we need not take any thought as to our provisions, for, from the day already referred to, when our provisions were exhausted, the whole company, consisting of over 300 persons, had been supplied with an abundance of provisions from the invisible, as we called it. The supply was maintained for 64 days, until we returned to the village from which we started. Thus far, none of us had any idea of the true significance or meaning of the things we were experiencing. Neither were we able to see that these things were performed by definite law, a law that all can use. When we were assembled for breakfast the next morning, we found 5 strangers in camp. They were introduced, and it was mentioned that they were from a party that was camped on the other side of the stream and were returning from the village of our destination. We thought very little of this at the time, as we naturally supposed that they had found a boat and had crossed in it. One of our party said, "If these people have a boat, why can we not use it to cross the stream?" I think all of us saw this as a way out of our difficulty, But we were told that there was no boat, as the crossing was not thought to be of sufficient importance to maintain one. After finishing breakfast that morning, we were all assembled on the banks of the stream. We noticed that Emil, Jast, and Nepro, with 4 others of our party, were talking with the 5 strangers. Jast came to us and said they would like to cross with the others to the camp on the other side of the stream, as they had decided to wait until the next morning to see if the water showed signs of receding. Of course, our curiosity was aroused, and we thought it rather foolhardy to attempt to swim a stream, as swift as the one before us, just to make a friendly call upon a neighbor. We felt that swimming was the only way the crossing could be accomplished. When Jast rejoined the group, the 12, fully dressed, walked to the bank of the stream, and with the utmost composure stepped on the water, not into it. I never shall forget my feelings as I saw each of those 12 men step from solid ground upon the running water. I held my breath, expecting, of course, to see them plunge beneath and disappear. I found afterwards that that was the thought of all our party. At the time, I think each of us held his breath until they were all past midstream. So astonished were we to see those 12 men walking calmly across the surface of the stream without the least inconvenience and not sinking below the soles of their sandals. When they stepped from the water to the farther bank, I felt that tons of weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I believe this was the feeling of every one of our party, judging from the sighs of relief as the last man stepped ashore. It certainly was an experience that words fail to describe. The 7 belonging to our party returned for lunch. While the excitement was not so intense at the second crossing, every one of us breathed more freely when the 7 were safe ashore again. Not one of our party had left the bank of the stream that forenoon. There was very little discussion regarding what we had witnessed, so engrossed were we with our own thoughts. The second day, the company was toiling up the steep side of a mountain with the hot sun pouring down upon us when our chief, who had said but little during the last 2 days, suddenly remarked, "Boys, why is it that man is obliged to crawl and grovel over this earth?" We answered in chorus that he had voiced our thoughts exactly. He went on to say, "How is it, if a few are able to do the things we have seen accomplished, that all men cannot accomplish the same things? How is it that man is content to crawl, and not only content to crawl, but is obliged to do so? If man was given dominion over all things, he was certainly given power to fly above the birds. If this is his dominion, why has he not asserted his dominion long ago? The fault must certainly be in man's own mind. This must all have come about by man's own mortal concept of himself. He has only been able, in his own mind, to see himself crawling. Thus he has only been able to crawl." Then Jas took up the thought and said, "You are perfectly right. It is all in man's consciousness. He is limited or unlimited, bound or free, just as he thinks. Do you think that the men you saw walk across the stream yesterday to save themselves, the inconvenience of this trip, are in any way special creations, any more than you are? No. They are not created in any way different from you. They do not have one atom more power than you were created with. They have, by the right use of their thought forces, developed their God-given power. The things you have seen are accomplished in accord with definite law, and every human being can use this law if he will." Chapter 9. Located in this village was the Healing Temple. It is claimed that only words of life, love, and peace have been given expression in this temple since its erection, and the vibrations are so potent that nearly all who pass through the temple are instantly healed. It is also claimed the words of life, love, and peace have been used and sent out so long from this temple, and the vibrations emanating from them are so strong that, should words of inharmony and imperfection be used at any time, they would have no power. We were told that this is an illustration of what takes place in man. If he would practice sending forth words of life, love, harmony, peace, and perfection, he would be in a short time not be able to utter an inharmonious word. We attempted to use inharmonious words and found in each instance that we could not even utter them. This temple was the destination of those of the company who were seeking healing. It is the custom for the masters who are in the vicinity to congregate at this village at certain intervals for a season of devotion and instruction to those who wish to avail themselves of the opportunity. The temple is dedicated entirely to healing and is open to the people at all times. As it is not always possible for the people to reach the masters encourage the people to go to the temple for healing. This is the reason they do not heal those that congregate for the pilgrimages. They accompany the pilgrims to show the people that they are no different than themselves, that all have the same God-given power within. I suspect that when they crossed the river that morning, they did it to show that they could rise above any emergency, and that we should also rise above any emergency. In places not accessible to this temple, all who come to the masters for help are greatly benefited. Of course, there are the curious and those who do not believe that do not seem to receive any help. We witnessed a number of assemblages of from 200 to 2,000 people, and all those desiring healing were healed. A great many told us they were healed by declaring silently that they desired to be made whole. We had the opportunity to observe a large number of those healed at different times, and we found that about 90% of these healings were permanent, while all the healings in the temple seemed to be permanent. It was explained that the temple is a concrete thing, located in one place representing the God Center, the Christ in the individual, just as all churches should typify this God, or Christ Center, in the individual, and that it is always accessible to those desiring to go there. They could go to the temple as often as they chose and stay as long as they wished. The ideal is thus formed in the minds of those who come to it, and the ideal becomes fixed in mind. Emil said, "Right here comes the suggestion that has led to the idolatry of the past. Men sought to grave in wood or stone, gold, silver, or brass, the image of that which they idealized, but any idol can only imperfectly picture the idea. The image, the idol, is no sooner formed than men become conscious that the ideal surpasses the idol, and they are shown that they must gaze upon love and idealize for themselves that which they wish to bring forth from the within. Instead of graving any idol and outer form of the ideal, they would express a later form of idolatry is to idealize the personality of the one who expresses our ideal. We should idealize the ideal which he expresses and not the personality which expresses it. This is true even of so great a person as Jesus. Thus, Jesus chose to go away when he saw the people were idealizing his personality instead of the ideal which he represented. They sought to make him their king, only realizing that he could supply them with every outer need, not recognizing that they, within themselves, had the power to supply their every need, and that this they must do, as he himself had done. He said, "It is expedient that I go away, for if I do not go, the Comforter will not come." Meaning that as long as they looked to his personality, they would not recognize their own powers, for they must look within their very selves. Another may teach or tell you, but you of yourselves must do the work, for if you look to another, you build the idol instead of bringing forth the ideal.